I mean, we all can kind of see the shock value of it and understand it how shocking that must be for a woman to just leave with nothing but the clothes on her back and her children. One of the first things we work with women, and it's an ongoing process, is really just about helping them rebuild their self-confidence. You're riding this wave of adrenaline and fight or flight for so long, then when you're re-traumatized, it's obviously triggered again, which can cause long-term health issues, physical health issues, mental health, all sorts of things. So if you can, really build out your theory of change to articulate the long-term impact you're trying to create, that's good. I just feel like, there might be a handful of perpetrators perhaps that are too far gone, whatever the language you want to use, but I'm sure the vast majority of them we can be working with in a different way. And so there's lots of great work going on in the country. But I think, once we start to shift the onus, it does almost rehumanize the situation for both victim, survivor and the perpetrators. And I, in my lowest, I would often think just actually how lucky I was and that this was really hard for me. But what must it be like for the women that didn't have the supports that I had, the love of family and friends around them, a network, a professional network, a career that was really, prior to that, quite healthy.
Just before we get started, if you're enjoying the podcast, can you please make sure you subscribe or follow my channel? This helps me out tremendously. Melanie Greblo, welcome to the FailWisdom Podcast.
Hello there, Paul. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on and looking forward to our conversation and really admire the amazing work you're doing. And so I guess to get started, can you tell a bit about your personal story behind the journey to becoming a social entrepreneur and founder of Banksia Academy?
Yeah, sure. There's probably two parts to my story of becoming a social entrepreneur, I think. One of them was an early experience in life, the loss of my sister, my younger sister, that she was almost 21 when she died from cancer. And so that set me on a bit of a path of really trying to kind of, find purpose and meaning in life, I guess, and led me to work in the not-for-profit space, in various different organizations across sort of, social impact. I worked in the arts and education a little bit as well, but then came back to the social impact space. And, after that experience with my sister, years later went into a founding CEO role at Home Hospice, a national social venture, working in end-of-life care. And, I'd sort of lots of different twists and turns in the path since then. But yes, it was from my own experiences that led me to start Scribed and Banksia Academy a few years ago. So living through some really difficult challenges in my family and, really kind of aware of how that was impacting me financially and certainly emotionally and psychologically. But the sort of financial security that I lost through that and the way I managed my work, I was self-employed. I was really lucky that I was self-employed. I could be much more flexible with what I needed to do and where I needed to be, the support my children needed at times, responding to kind of crises as they occurred. And I, in my lowest, I would often think just actually how lucky I was and that this was really hard for me. But what must it be like for the women that didn't have the supports that I had, the love of family and friends around them, a network, a professional network, a career that was really, prior to that, quite healthy.
Yeah.
And and just thought, this was sort of pre the kind of conflation of the cost of living crisis that we have now, but it was edging towards that. I lived in Sydney. Housing was expensive already. All of those things that just to me seemed to create mountains for these women to kind of try to overcome, to think about leaving abusive partners let alone then what would happen when they left. So, yeah, that's what brought me to the journey.
Yeah, it's interesting, and those women need so much support. And interestingly, this episode will air in a few months, but just today, the New South Wales government announced some big changes to the bail for offenders, where they have to prove instead of the prosecution, and also certain ones will have to wear ankle bracelets as well. But obviously, a lot more is needed.
Mm.
Probably also for the actual offenders as well to, give them the psychological health that they need as well to be doing such terrible things. I get.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. I completely agree. I think it's great to see, these changes come in today. It's, sadly a little late for some of the women that, that died, particularly in April this year in Australia.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I agree. It's I think having experienced some of the systems that we have to manage, victim survivors and perpetrators of domestic violence, it's quite dehumanizing for everyone involved. And I'd love to see, some, I guess, systems change and innovation, social innovation in those systems where we could start to recenter humans at the core and design from that human-centered kind of space so that, yeah, we can actually seriously look at how we prevent violence, intervene when there's violence,
Yeah.
and support when there's violence as well. Yeah.
It's interesting. In my startup, we were creating real life simulated virtual reality scenarios whereby workers or students could experience what they're going to experience in the workplace. So we were in the hospitality area because my co-founder was from that. So for example, working at a bar, you have to refuse service, really hard. And if you can actually do it and experience it, in a safe space. And then we thought this would be perfect for when the police go out to train them, because I've heard that like more than 50% of the calls are for domestic violence. And, as good as the police are, they haven't got that, a lot of training that like a counselor or a psychologist would have. And, I think what I'd like to see personally is to go out with a counselor, with somebody with experience in that space, and probably a lot of times they could, talk the situation down as well, and would help the police at the same time, I guess.
Yeah. There are so many things we could do, and I think you touched on something before too, where the onus is being shifted, from being on the woman to prove or prosecution to prove to the perpetrator. And I think the more we can start to think about ways that we can really shift the onus away from being on women to leave, and figure out how we support them to stay in their own homes rather than remove the woman and the children, and hold the perpetrators to account, but again in a humanized way that can, I mean, I'm a tragic optimist, to be honest, and so I've walked through life knowing that, really believing that no one's, inherently evil. And so these men are not evil. They're not monsters that people describe them as. They do horrific things and behave in horrific ways. And often it's born of their own trauma and experiences in life. And yeah, I just feel like, there might be a handful of perpetrators perhaps that are too far gone, whatever the language you want to use, but I'm sure the vast majority of them we can be working with in a different way. And so there's lots of great work going on in the country. So, but I think, yeah, once we start to shift the onus, it does almost rehumanize the situation for both victim survivor and the perpetrator. So, yeah.
And it's so hard, like you were saying, it's always the woman that has to leave, and then they leave sometimes with almost nothing whatsoever. And that's actually because you're one of the snow entrepreneurs, and that's, I've interviewed Ren Fernando from Relove, and that she helps when people are in that situation, and then they can, refurnish their whole place that they're moving into. So it's a big shout out to Ren and
Yeah.
Reloved. It's really difficult because usually haven't got any money or resources. They may end up in like a hostel or women's refuge or something, and they might have the kids with them, and they may not have been working. Like it's really tough. And even women that I've heard that women that are retirement age, a lot of them like are really poor and they're in a really horrible situation. So, for example, if they get divorced, sometimes the guy has a big super and he's okay with that. They don't have much at all, and then they may end up renting somewhere and not having much money, and they're like 60, 70 years old. It's just
over 55 years of age women are the fastest group of fastest growing group of homeless people in Australia. Yeah, it's frightening. Yeah. And it's I think unless you've had the lived experience, it's really difficult to, I mean, we all can kind of see the shock value of it and understand it from how shocking that must be for a woman to just leave with nothing but the clothes on her back and her children. That's a large proportion of women that have to leave that way. There's a whole heap of women that leave and don't have any contact with a sort of crisis accommodation service or a relocation service, anything like that, because they might have a bit of money so they can get themselves into a private rental or whatever it might be. The trauma for them and their children, and the impact particularly on children, I think they've been the invisible victims for so long, but they're directly impacted by what's going on in their home. We used to consider them as kind of observers of it and witnesses to domestic violence, but now we understand, and the research tells us that they are victims themselves in the situation. So there's the way that then trauma kind of plays out is really devastating for mothers and their children.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was doing my startup, we had this connection with this charity group called Stronger Brains. What they do is they strengthen the neural pathways of the brains of those children that have been through all that trauma. Because if they're not strengthened, then they're distracted, they go through school, they don't learn much, and it changes their whole life, And so, people don't realize the impact. It's really a lot more than people realize.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm not sure that we've got some data around the cost to the economy of domestic and family violence at $22 billion a year, but I'm not sure that really takes into account the impact of trauma on children and the way that plays out in their lives, the cost to the education system, the NDIS, I'm sure it's actually far greater than the number that we often talk about.
Yeah, and we have to think about those costs as well, but I just see it's the human cost first, and we absolutely have to do something. You can talk about billions and all that, and it's probably true. And unfortunately, some people will only do something, when there is, they think, okay, like it is costing a lot. So I guess, everyone's motivation.
But the great majority of that 22 billion is borne by women and children. Yeah, women. Yeah.
We definitely have to do a lot more, and pretty much you are doing quite a bit. So can you just tell us about what you're doing and how you're helping women like this and others?
Yeah, absolutely. So in a few years ago, I started a business, a startup called Scribed, and really the intention for the business from the outset was to kind of co-design and create an employment model that was safe, secure, and flexible, and remote, so that particularly, so that women facing barriers to employment, particularly survivors of domestic and family violence, would access, meaningful and well remunerated work. And so really trying to look at, breaking that cycle of, or breaking that kind of, that choice that many women face, and the wonderful Dr. Ann Summers' research shows it now, that women in domestic violence face quite a black and white choice. They either stay in the violence or leave and be plunged into poverty. So really try to break that. A lot of women will return to violence because of financial reasons. They just can't survive in the world financially without that partner. So the business, we started off as a transcription service. We sort of took a path to designing a particular product for HR managers that we then put on the dump when ChatGPT was released. So we sort of failed fast and put it to the side and kept going.
Yeah.
And so where Scribe really now is a kind of outsourced digital marketing and social media solution for small businesses. So we provide, digital marketing, social media management, content production.
Yeah.
We do quite a bit of virtual administration as well, so virtual assistants. And all of that work that these women can do quite flexibly from home, where they really can juggle the many competing demands on their time. So the other kind of, I guess, invisible piece that I'd experienced my challenges was the constant disruptions to work. And some of that in terms of coercive control is deliberate, and some of it's just par of the course when you're supporting children and yourself through really challenging times. That could happen obviously outside of family violence as well, or for other reasons. But the dropping everything to support a child, pick them up from school, some women have to drop everything to go and report to police. They might have to, they take huge amounts of time off work to attend court, to prepare for court appearances, attend court hearings. In the family court, they can go for days. And then the impact of re-traumatization on someone too can't be underestimated. So actually, you might spend a week or more, months really, but intensively a week or two before appearances. And then you're in the appearances, and then it'll take you weeks sometimes to recover from the emotional kind of state, the heightened kind of you're in fight or flight mode for all that time again. Yeah. So Jess Hill describes this so well in her writing, and when she talks about kind of coercive control being really a perpetrator's intention to destroy a victim survivor's nervous system, and that's exactly what it does. And so you're riding this wave of adrenaline and fight or flight for so long, then when you're re-traumatized, it's obviously triggered again, which can cause long-term health issues, physical health issues, mental health, all sorts of things. So I really wanted to co-design a way with victim survivors to where an employment model was fit for purpose, but also giving them skills for the future of work. So we're kind of almost also at the same time building a pipeline of talent for the skills shortages of the future. So to do that, we knew we needed to create, some really great training and a lot of wraparound support for women working in our business. And so I founded Banksia Academy, which is our not-for-profit arm. Yeah. And so in the academy, we deliver a whole lot of digital skills training, and we created Australia's first virtual hub for survivors of domestic violence, with a focus on returning to work and thriving at work. So very focused around this pathway to financial independence. And in the hub, we offer things on a weekly kind of basis. We have a program of masterclasses, and then could be everything from, financial, well-being, right through to parenting children who've experienced trauma, mindfulness, self-leadership, productivity, communication, presentation, everything that's sort of in the kind of personal and professional development realm. That's where the masterclasses come in. It's all free for survivors. Any victim survivor can join our hub. Yeah. Yeah, so it's really wrapping that broader kind of support around them, as well as supporting them to transition back into work, either with Scribed or with external employment partners that we're always looking for to, bring into our community of friendly employers, and we can provide a whole lot of support to them as well to, really become as inclusive as they can be in their workplace to support these women and learn more about what work is like for not only victim survivors of domestic violence, but a lot of other women who are facing other barriers to employment.
Yeah, no, it's really important work, and that's what's going to make the difference. Giving them all those skills that they need. And like you said, they just leave with nothing really, and trauma, and it's terrible that it's probably it could almost feel like they're in a war zone, like coming out of a war zone, we're having that fear and that violence and the way it affects your whole nervous system, and then the huge decision to leave, and as far as I'm aware as well, a woman that's in that sort of abusive relationship, their self-esteem goes down, 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 and then actually rely more on that same person that's abusing them. So it's a really horrible situation.
That's right. And then it's a kind of a vicious cycle. Yeah. I know that one of the first things we work with women, and it's an ongoing process, is really just about helping them rebuild their self-confidence. So there's a lot of masterclasses sort of covering content that helps them do that. It's actually just heartbreaking to see how the regard they hold themselves in at the beginning, heartbreaking, but so rewarding and heartening to see them journey through. And even only after being in the academy for a few weeks, a couple of months, you start to see these changes, and it's just can make me cry actually. It's just beautiful. And then they're sharing what it's doing for them, and being in that community with other women who are sharing that experience and journey with them. And everyone's different, obviously, but one of the beautiful things about the connection in the hub is that it's very aspirational, the kind of spirit of the hub, I think, and no one's focused on the past and the pain of what they've been through. They've very much come to the space ready to move forward in their life and taking those steps, and it's such a privilege to walk that journey with them.
And I think it's so important to be moving forward as well, because you were talking about like court appearances, and that is like reliving the trauma, like you said, so they have to move forward to escape all of that. And I think the work that you're doing is so vital and so important. And so you have like these employers that work with you, which is fantastic. And I think doing like digital marketing, social media, they're really highly valued skills. Like for example, startups, that's an area they have to be really good at, marketing, sales and all that sort of thing. So I think the skills that they're learning are really great. But I was going to ask you, because I know that you are the involved with the Asia Pacific Summit, I think it is, the Impact Investing Ecosystem in the Asia Pacific. And I've had quite a few people on my show, including some from Len for Good, that are helping in that space as well. So two questions is, where do you get your funding from? And what are your thoughts on that space with social enterprise and these sort of projects? Because I think it was Ben Jeffries was saying that there's a $31 billion gap between the mums and dads investors and the VCs that are just looking for unicorns. So how do you get your funding, and you tell us about that ecosystem and what, because I know you're doing some stuff in that space as well.
Yeah. Yes, it's an interesting space, the world of capital. So we were very fortunate, I guess, to be successful with a New South Wales government social impact investment. So we're currently um, three quarters of a year into a 4-year contract with the New South Wales government, a payment by outcomes contract. So that's where part of our funding comes from.
Yeah.
And we funded the development of the academy with some early philanthropic investment from the Vasudhara Foundation and an anonymous trust in Victoria. And we just opened a capital raise this week, actually, for Scribe. So we're raising $400,000 to really scale now what we've built as a really kind of viable model, and it'll support us to scale, so ready to kind of do that hockey stick curve. So, but we're not talking unicorn numbers. It's really interesting in the social impact, startup space where the impact is front and center in everything we do. So it's we've got a theory of change. We're building an impact measurement framework. We're serious about measuring impact. We're obviously already doing that for our payment by outcomes contract, but we want to deepen that measurement. It's really core to what we're all about. But obviously we at the same time are building a commercial business, and that has to make commercial sense at the same time. So we are going to impact investors first with the raise. So we're talking to a number of different investors at the moment in that space. So my background in the impact investing world was from its very early days of the summit in the Asia Pacific. I worked with the co-founders, Rob Irving and Alex Fayer, to curate the Impact Investment Summit. So I did that for 7 years, and I curated the first Gender Lens Investment Summit here in the Asia Pacific as well with their company, Impact Asia Pacific. And so I got to know the ecosystem really well, both here and globally. Learned so much, was incredibly lucky, met some just unbelievably inspiring people doing great things around the world, people innovating with financial instruments, and it was really great. I think obviously the pool here is quite small in Australia, but it's growing, and there's some great work being done with the bigger philanthropic foundations too, and shifting some of their capital to impact as well. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah, and what advice would you give like early stage startup founders in the sort of impact social enterprise space when it comes to funding? Because I've heard that it's very difficult, and even more so for women founders. I think they only get 4% of the funding. So what advice would you give?
0.4%.
No. Is it 0.4?
0.4.
Oh, goodness me.
No, so I think it was in 2023. Of all the global capital that went to startups, 0.4% went to women, female founders. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And it's not because there's a lack of females in the startup space. There may be, fewer female founders, but there's a lot of females working in the startup space in all different areas. So, I'm a young female startup founder, and I need funding for this amazing social enterprise that I'm doing. It's going to help a lot of people. What should I do? Where should I go? How should I approach that?
Yeah, look, it's, there's a few things, I guess. Like, there are some good grants out there, so I'd always go looking for kind of, non-dilutive funding to start with, and if you can find a grant, grab it. And obviously, if you've got a really strong value proposition in terms of the impact on the business, you're more likely to succeed. So doing that early work, I think, to get that right. And if you can, really build out your theory of change to articulate the long-term impact you're trying to create, that's good. And I mean, I talked to a lot of folk in the impact space and in social impact work, social enterprises from the beginning around our structure, our legal structure, and then hence went down the pathway of creating that hybrid structure. So we've got the PTY Ltd and the not-for-profit. And that was really so big, from learning really and listening to the experience of the incredible people that went before me, like, your Too Good Co and organisations like that, where, one of the challenges of social impact businesses, when you're serious about the impact, it can really kind of drain the profitability on the business and the commercial side of funding the programmatic elements of creating the impact. And so you just got to, for us particularly, there's that training element that's just essential, and then the wraparound support. And so that doesn't come, inexpensively. And so we can support that through philanthropic contributions, as well as the business reinvesting into the academy. So, there's just be open to different models, and, And then I think, if there's capital out there, I guess, and knowing where to go, talk to people, I think the ecosystem's quite friendly, and so to reach out to people, I'm always happy to share anything I've learned. Certainly share connections. I mean, what's eye-opening to me in the sort of since 2015 when I started working in the impact investing space, is that the quantum of capital out there ready to be deployed is actually huge. Right. And so, I've come to this that without necessarily a super competitive or, scarcity kind of mentality, that there's actually, it's quite, it's quite significant. And so it's really just about really getting what your value proposition is. And then, of course, it's the connections. And so, ask for introductions, find out where you're, who might be most interested in what you're building. And just don't be afraid to ask, I think, because I think it can be, it's kind of probably a little exclusive if you haven't been part of that world and how you kind of can break into it. So, and that's not equitable. And so I think we, in any way we can, as people in that ecosystem, support others to come in, then we ought to, because we might be missing some fabulous innovations otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. And if are there any particular groups that they can reach out to or online groups or something to get like a start in that area and start making connections that you would recommend?
Yeah, there are some great organisations, particularly in the social enterprise space. So there's, in various states and territories, there's the kind of state-based peak kind of organisation for social enterprise. New South Wales and ACT, it's called SECNA. Victoria has one, obviously.
Can you spell that?
So the Social Enterprise Council of New South Wales and ACT. The acronym is SECNA, SECNA.
Okay.
There's social traders, where you can kind of go and get support to become certified as a social enterprise. There's fabulous people like Start Some Good, Lend for Good, who are really kind of connected into the ecosystem. Where else? And then smaller groups, the Social Impact Hub in Sydney is fantastic.
Yep.
Victoria's got some really great organisations as well. They're probably more mature, I guess, in their social enterprise development and the ecosystem down there.
Yeah. Okay, well, there's some good starting points for people. So they can look those up and start making connections, I guess, in there and see where it goes from there. But I think, like you said, if people ask for help, generally people do want to help others, and they will reach out, particularly in that space, I would say.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, as you know, the name of my podcast is Fail Wisdom, because fail is not a dirty word. It's if we don't fail, then we actually don't do anything, because that's life. It's just failing and learning, failing and learning. And startup world is pretty brutal, really. It's difficult. It's a really real roller coaster. So I think we all have lots of fails, and I'd like you to maybe tell us about some failure that you've had in your startup, and what you did, and then how you overcame that or not.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, it's you're right. I often say to people, I was just saying to one of our team this morning, this is not for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Look, if I could call it a fail, and this is probably the example that I give is, and it's it's interesting because it took me probably until now in my life and my age to recognize that that sort of failure is actually just learning. And so I don't even sit here thinking, I don't have one of those big ghastly fail stories that that often sprout from the startup world. Thankfully, we could still have one down the track. But we did go down this path of designing a product for HR managers. I invested, money into it, not a lot of money, which thank goodness, but a lot of time and obviously really gearing up for this product to take flight and put it in the market. We were starting to kind of put a demo into the market, and, we were absolutely really blindsided by ChatGPT. We knew AI was coming, and we knew that the transcription AI was already that's what we were going to use. We were already embracing it in the product we developed.
Yeah.
But when ChatGPT was released, it's actually just, our product would have survived another year, 2 years maybe, and maybe even kind of flourished a little bit, but then it would have just died. So we just called it and just decided, regardless of the fact that I'd spent 10 months probably working on it and really building it, all the customer research that we did, the hours of, development and investment we put into it was, just not worth the losses that we'd copped down the way. So, we just sort of almost overnight decided, okay, that's that.
Yeah. And you know what? I commend you on that, because a lot of us in the startup world would say, no, I really believe in my product, and let's just keep going and put more time and more money and more effort, like I did. And so, you have to, if you can know, like, okay, this really isn't working, and, the problem is, like, but I spent all this time or all this money on it, and then it's all going to be wasted, so I have to keep going. Well, but if you realize that it's just not going to happen, then the earlier you get out, the better. Like, hindsight's really good. You can think, oh, if only I got out earlier. But I commend you on doing that, because a lot of us in the startup world, we're in love with our own idea or product, and we'll keep pushing and pushing.
Something one of the tech developers that I was working with on it, ingrained in me from the beginning was fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And it's just it was so brilliant, and big shout out to Wayne Troy. Because it's so true and I think that's true of all innovation, whether it's, creating a fantastic tech product or social innovation and creating a new designing a service a different way or a response, a different way. That idea of falling in love with the problem is really great. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't without, like a degree of, these are way too strong, these words, but like not embarrassment, but, a bit of, oh God, I have to face these people I've been selling this to. I have to face these investors that I was trying to get investment from. And, but I think again, making the decision and putting across through it early, I think they could see, well, actually that was smart. So
yeah, it's interesting. I interviewed one of the founders of Twitter. His nickname's Ravel, and he was saying that like in that space, they all know each other and the investors, and then you get a reputation. And then in one instance, he had something that they invested millions of dollars in, and it just didn't work. And then he contacted his investors and say, it's not going to go ahead. And one of the investors saying, why do you contact me? You don't even need to. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, it's so much trust and faith in him, and he would still invest with him in the future as well.
Yeah.
I
think that's a sign of a fabulous founder though too, because I think there's a lot of stories out there where the opposite's at play.
Yeah.
When you've got, rogues just taking investment, and literally like, I don't know, doing what with it.
You've got to be very careful out there as well. So obviously, you get a lot of satisfaction seeing these women grow and change and come out of, those terrible situations. But I guess it can be grueling as well, working, particularly at the beginning and seeing those situations as well. So how does Melanie maintain her well-being, her mental health, working in that sort of situation, and also, being a woman founder of a startup, which, like we said, is pretty grueling as well.
Yeah. It actually requires enormous focus to kind of, maintain my own health and well-being, I guess. I think it's a common kind of challenge for a lot of founders. So the work that we're doing, yes, can be extremely emotional, emotionally kind of taxing, but at the same time, I feel like the solution that we're bringing to the problem, just the small part of contribution that we're making, is at the joyful end of the spectrum or of the journey. So we get to see women literally like the chrysalis kind of transform.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly joyful. And I take my hats off to those frontline workers, those support services in crisis support, where day after day they're seeing the just sheer devastation. And I couldn't do that work. There's just no way I could do that work. So hats off. But it's just really quite something to see this, this transformation in women. I'm a single mum still. I've got 2 young kids at home that I raise on my own.
Yeah.
I have to balance that with running, a startup, and it gets tricky. I have enormous support, particularly from my own mother. So big shout out to you, Mum.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it actually without her. So, I think it's important to say that, because a lot of female founders or even senior women executives, without the support of someone like a parent, close family, obviously the paid support that you can get, just can't do it. So, or a loving partner, so caring, helpful partner. So, that's really real for a lot of women. And, and I just, I watch what I eat, I exercise, I, try to do all those things so that I can, maintain my physical well-being as well. But also, sometimes just switch off, the the month of April
Yeah.
was really, really challenging for, I think, all Australians. And then particularly if you're working in anywhere in or around domestic and family violence, it really was just getting slammed home every day,
Yeah.
state of affairs. And it's really difficult to just watch the news day in, day out and consume the news, the bad news day after day. And I just, particularly over the last week, just had to stop reading and watching it and just take a break because I know it's there. And, I feel like waking up every day and really looking forward to the day of work ahead is doing my bit. And like I can, quite happily ignore that out there for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's really important. It's really important because if you focus on all those negative things, they might be real, but if that's all you focus on, then it really does affect you, and you have to have a break. It's just like in social media as well. You need to have a break from social media as well. It can just get too much. All right. Well, look, to finish off, I'd like to know, during your time in this space and with your startup and everything, what have you learned about yourself?
Yeah, great question. I also, I think what I've learned and what I'm learning is also a kind of product of my, of an age that I'm reaching. I'm turning 50 this year. And so I think the learning's made richer by that as well at the moment. So the last few years, I would never have used the word resilience about myself in the past. And people have often said that to me or, during so many years of, challenges, people have said, I don't know how you do it. I used to just think, well, you just have to, I've got two, still in my care, two beautiful children. I've got 3 children though, one who's older, and you just get up and keep going, really. So it wasn't anything special. But I can look back now and see that there were parts of my journey that I, have been, extremely resilient and again, feel lucky that I was perhaps more resilient because I had support. I've learned that, day in, day out in this work, I've learned, it's sort of deepened my value around love and, really that kindness, care, those values are just so important, and that the more we can build those into business and the way we do business. And, one thing about impact investing that I think bugs me quite a lot is that it's sort of moved more towards, business as usual rather than impact first. And, is that real systems change, investing in, green tech, clean tech? We need it, absolutely, funnel as much capital there as we can. But are we really creating the changes in the kind of structural and systemic kind of frameworks that we've built capitalism on to create a more fair and equitable world? I don't know. And so I'm learning how to, I guess what I'm learning and trying to keep learning is how to keep leaning into that while we operate in a commercial world, but how can we at the same time create deep impact as well as a kind of the breadth of impact that we can. So I guess, what I'm learning about myself is, that I'm curious and, and don't really want to settle for easy answers. And, I feel like as I get to this age, it might be time to start relaxing a little bit, but I'm more curious and more, wanting to ask what one of my favorite poets, refers to as the beautiful questions, and not settle for easy answers to things.
Oh, I love that. The beautiful questions. Yeah. Well, hopefully I've asked you some nice questions. I don't know, beautiful.
It's been great to talk to you, Paul. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
So, just before we finish, would you like to maybe give a shout out to maybe some investors or philanthropists that are listening, if they maybe want to support what you're doing, how they could do that? Is there anything you'd like to say about that?
Yeah. What I'd say about it, I think, is that, the way that we've created this hybrid structure is that, the commercial part of what we're doing, I see as creating deep impact. The women who come into work at Scribed have the chance of, of receiving a really good kind of, salary well above the minimum wage, really rebuilding that financial security in their lives and everything that can lead to. One woman got a loan for a car when she started working with us. She didn't have a car before that. Another woman's thinking about, owning a home now rather than renting, those sorts of things. And then in the academy, we can create this breadth of impact and impact many, because we've built the model to be scalable. And so I guess I would invite anyone to, who's interested in supporting, really kind of breaking those intergenerational cycles of poverty and trauma that can come out of situations of family violence to talk to us, because I think when you invest in this recovery phase and the rebuilding phase for women, you're investing in prevention. It is prevention in action. So that's what I'd say to investors, whether you're impact investors or philanthropists. And also if I can, Paul, I'd love to shout out to, corporate Australia and businesses out there who want to be doing more. We've got support for workplaces through the academy, and we can better support your employees who are going through domestic and family violence through our workplace hub. We're always looking for mentors, so women who can walk the journey with our participants in the academy. And they're, professional women. You don't have to have any particular, skills, but the willingness to just be there and support a woman, mostly in helping her believe in herself again. So mentors, always on the lookout, and any contributors who have skills, and particularly around those digital skills, to contribute in the learning for women, that would be amazing.
Yeah, well, it's such a great cause, and you're doing so much great work that's so needed. I mean, so many people are really impacted, not just the women, but, their families. And I think just about everybody will know somebody that's impacted, I think, by this sort of thing. So commend what you're doing. I love what you're doing, and keep going with it. Keep that resilience going. And I just hope, and I'm sure that you're going to keep growing and help so many people that are need that help, which is wonderful. And I'm a big supporter, big fan.
Thank you so much, Paul. Really appreciate it. It's been great to chat.
Yeah, thanks, Melanie.